My name is Elise Foster. I'm the oldest daughter in a family full of uniforms, medals, and loud voices. My father served 2 tours in Vietnam. My mother ran every base household like a mission, and my younger siblings were built for the spotlight. Me, I was the quiet one, the one they forgot to introduce when the neighbors dropped by, the one who always got stuck refilling drinks and clearing plates without being asked. That night started like most family dinners. Overcooked roast, too much salt, and a living room buzzing with stories I wasn't invited into. Olivia, my younger sister, was holding court again, talking about her latest patient, some boy who drew superheroes while waiting for dialysis. Everyone laughed in all the right places. I smiled politely, mostly because I'd been doing it for years. I reached for the bread basket. It was empty. No one noticed. I glanced at my water glass, also empty. No one offered a refill. Olivia's fiancé, some guy named Jake, sat beside her. He seemed nice enough, a little stiff, probably military. They are all in my family. She was draped around him like she owned the table. I stayed quiet. That was my role. Be helpful, stay small, don't make a scene. Then it happened. Olivia tossed a crumpled napkin across the table. It landed on my elbow. She didn't even look up when she said, "Elise, could you at least be useful?" I picked it up without a word. Dad didn't flinch. Mom kept pouring wine. Ryan, my brother, snorted into his beer. I sat back in my chair holding the napkin, not sure what stung more, the comment or how natural it felt. I've been called invisible before, not directly but in the ways that matter. The missed birthdays, the forgotten promotions, the way Olivia once introduced me at a barbecue as her retired admin sister who's really into books or something. I never corrected her. It didn't feel worth the effort. But that night, something was different. Not because I planned it, but because the silence I had wrapped myself in for so long finally shifted. And as I sat there still holding that damn napkin, I realized I wasn't angry. I was done. And being done is its own kind of power. The napkin landed by my elbow with a soft thud, but it hit harder than anyone at that table could have guessed. Olivia didn't look at me when she said it, just sipped her wine and said, "Elise, could you at least be useful?" The words didn't sting because they were new, they stung because they weren't. I reached for the napkin, folded it slowly, and placed it on my lap without saying a word. Jake was sitting across from me, quiet for most of the night. He didn't laugh at Ryan's bad jokes, or jump in to praise Olivia's latest heroic moment on the pediatric floor. He'd barely touched his drink. Up to that point, I figured he was just another silent guy trying to survive dinner with my family. Then he stood. His chair scraped the floor loud enough to cut through the noise. Olivia looked up, puzzled, like she didn't understand why he wasn't still laughing at her stories. Jake's voice was calm, firm, with the kind of certainty you don't hear often in family homes. He looked directly at me and said, "Commander Foster, ma'am." Then he gave a small nod, the kind you give someone whose rank demands it. The entire room froze. Ryan stopped mid-joke, fork in hand. Mom's mouth hung open. Dad blinked twice like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Olivia's smile cracked just slightly. Not enough for most people to notice, but I saw it. I sat there with the napkin still in my lap, staring back at Jake, my face blank, but my heart racing. No one moved, no one breathed. And for the first time in years, I didn't shrink into the silence. I let it stretch, let it wrap around the table like a wire pulled tight. Jake didn't waver. He looked at me like I was the only person in the room who made sense, like he wasn't seeing Olivia's big show anymore, but something else entirely, something real. Dad finally cleared his throat and said, "Commander," like he was testing the word for the first time. Jake didn't explain. He didn't owe anyone that. He simply nodded again and sat down. Olivia stared at him, then at me, confusion turning into something more fragile, doubt. I stayed quiet, not because I didn't have words, but because I knew silence would hit harder. Olivia tried to laugh it off. "Oh, Jake, she's just logistics or something," civilian sighed. But her voice was a pitch too high, a little too fast, the kind of tone people use when their story starts to slip. Jake looked at her not unkindly, but like he was starting to realize she'd told him a version of me that wasn't just wrong but intentional. "Logistics," he repeated like he was weighing the word. Then he looked at me again. That explains everything, he said, and it didn't sound like a joke. Ryan tried to jump in with another joke about me being on a ship somewhere near Guam. Mom chuckled politely, but no one laughed for real. The room was starting to shift just a little, but enough that I felt it. Jake leaned back in his chair and picked up his glass, but he didn't drink. He just watched me. Not like a man watching someone he barely knew, like a soldier recognizing the person who once called the shots. I kept my face neutral. I had no idea how much he remembered, or if he even knew back then who I really was. But it didn't matter because in that moment, someone at that table finally saw me. Not as the quiet one, not as Olivia's sister, but as the woman who'd spent her life doing the kind of work you don't talk about over dinner. The kind of work that makes a man stand up and salute you in the middle of your family's wine-soaked Sunday roast. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, and that stillness was louder than anything anyone could have said. Growing up, I learned early that being quiet didn't mean being respected. It meant being overlooked. At every school event, Olivia was front and center in her cheer uniform, all bright eyes and effortless charm. I was the one holding the extra jacket, standing off to the side, hoping someone would remember I needed a ride home. At home, the pattern was the same. Olivia got the praise, the attention, and the questions about her day. I got comments like Elise is just more low-key or she likes being behind the scenes. It wasn't malicious. It was worse. It was easy for them. Easier to slot me into a box labeled dependable but dull than to ask who I really was. When I joined the Navy at 18, no one came to the send-off. Dad said he was proud but too busy with work to make the trip. Mom mailed a card with a Bible verse and a Target gift card. Olivia posted a selfie with the caption, "Saying bye to my sis, she's off to do admin magic." I didn't correct her. I was used to them defining me in ways that didn't challenge their idea of themselves. Every time I tried to share something real, they redirected. I once mentioned completing survival training in Arctic conditions. Mom responded with a comment about frostbite and said I needed to moisturize more. When I emailed photos from my first deployment, Olivia joked that I looked like I was in a movie about paper pushers. She called me Captain Clipboard in front of Jake once. He laughed. I didn't. At dinner parties, when people asked what I did, Dad would say she's in logistics, really organized, then change the subject to Olivia's latest patient story, or Ryan's failed business that somehow always got spun as entrepreneurial spirit. I became the backdrop, present, but not centered. Necessary, but never celebrated. Over time I stopped offering anything. I stopped trying to explain the work I did, the hours I logged, the operations I helped coordinate that never made headlines. They didn't want details. They wanted a version of me that was safe, small, and non-threatening. And I gave it to them, not because I agreed, but because I was tired. Tired of performing modesty when I'd earned more than they could imagine. Tired being polite while Olivia hogged every beam of light. Tired of making space for people who never made space for me. They thought I was content, being quiet. But the truth was, I was keeping score in silence. And that score was about to be settled. I started in logistics like they always said, but what they never knew was that I was recruited within 2 years into a classified operations unit. Not because I asked, but because someone higher up noticed I could plan what others couldn't even imagine holding together. My first deployment with the team wasn't glamorous. It was freezing Arctic coast. I remember the silence more than the cold. We lost comms on the 3rd night. One guy panicked, whispered, "We wouldn't make it." I didn't answer. I kept writing contingency routes by flashlight until we found a way out. That mission never made a headline. It didn't even exist on paper, but we all came home alive. And that became my reputation. The quiet one who got it done. I learned to move through systems where noise was weakness and precision was everything. Over the years, I was deployed into zones they couldn't even list on the maps. I coordinated joint extractions, handled encrypted communications, and learned to read a battlefield before anyone fired a shot. I earned 3 combinations before 30, all under names I wasn't allowed to say in public. No press, no parade, just mission complete and back on the next flight. When I turned 34, they promoted me to commander and assigned me to oversee operations for a new classified division. I signed off on personnel who were barely out of boot camp. Some of them didn't last, some did. A few came back and wrote books. I never even told my parents where I was stationed. The one time I tried, Dad assumed I was still pushing papers. Mom asked if I had time to come home for Easter. Olivia sent me a meme about office burnout. I deleted the texts and stayed quiet, not because I didn't care, but because I knew they'd never really listen. They needed me small. I needed silence to stay sharp. I watched Olivia rack up praise for speeches she borrowed from my debriefs. She never asked permission. She didn't think she needed to. She thought I was harmless, a woman with spreadsheets. But what she didn't understand, what none of them did, was that I built my career in silence. Not out of fear but out of discipline. I didn't brag. I didn't need to because while they were laughing at dinner tables, I was holding teams together in the middle of blizzards. And I never lost a single one. That was my story, hidden behind words like logistics and support staff. And that was fine until someone decided to steal it. That's when I knew the silence had to end. I found out by accident. I was reviewing access logs one afternoon, part of a routine audit for an internal report. One of the usernames caught my eye. It looked familiar, too familiar. A login from Fort Waverly using my credentials. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone mistyped. Then I saw the pattern. Dates, files, timestamps, reports I'd written, debriefs I'd compiled, a strategic framework I'd spent months developing, quoted word for word. I kept scrolling, feeling the kind of cold that doesn't come from the weather. And then I saw it, the name on the promotion packet, Olivia Foster. I read the file twice, my writing her name, my mission data, her signature. She hadn't even tried to disguise it, just copied and pasted like it was hers to claim. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was theft. Strategic, surgical, and personal. She used my rank, my security clearance, and my work to present herself as a rising leader in her field. She'd gotten a new position because of it. New badge, new responsibilities, all built on a foundation of lies. I should have been furious, and part of me was, but what I felt more than anything was stillness, a kind of icy calm I hadn't felt since that night on the Arctic coast. I didn't confront her. Not right away. OK screenshots, archived every log, every access point, saved every copied sentence and email trail. No anger, just evidence. I wasn't going to explode, I was going to wait. Because Olivia didn't just borrow my words, she bet everything on the belief that I wouldn't speak, that I'd stay in the role she'd cast for me, the quiet one, the harmless one. She forgot silence wasn't submission, it was a tactic. I watched her rise, watched the congratulations roll in, watched our parents beam over her new post, completely unaware she'd stolen her way to it. She posted a photo online, smiling in front of a command building I used to walk through daily. The caption read, "Hard work pays off." I saved that too. When she texted me to invite me to dinner, I knew what she wanted. A prop, a background character to show off her success. She never expected me to show, she was counting on that. But I said yes. I didn't say anything when she reminded me twice not to dress too formal, or when she sent a follow-up saying, "Keep it casual, just family." That was her way of boxing me in again. Make sure I stayed small, make sure I didn't make her look bad, but I wasn't there for performance. I was there for the truth. I replayed the conversation with my CEO in my mind. I'd reported the breach but asked to hold off on escalation. Not yet. Not until I faced her. I wanted her to see it in my eyes. That I knew that I'd known for months and that she'd mistaken silence for weakness one time too many. There's a kind of power in waiting, in knowing the exact moment someone's world will start to crack. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for clarity. And that only comes when you let people dig their own hole deep enough to fall in. That night, I brought nothing with me but my composure. I smiled politely, nodded through her stories, and sat back while she tried to charm the room. She had no idea what was coming. That the man beside her, Jake Monroe, had once served under my command, that he owed his life to the woman she claimed was good with spreadsheets. She thought she was in control. But the moment I picked up that napkin, the countdown had begun. And by the time Jake stood and said my name with a tone only a trained soldier would use, everything shifted. She had the spotlight for years. But I had the truth. And the truth doesn't need volume to be heard, it just needs the right moment. The room was too warm, crowded with voices trying to outshine each other. Olivia had just finished a story about organizing a surprise event at her clinic. All dramatic pauses and hand gestures. Ryan laughed too loudly and Mom refilled her wine, clearly enjoying the spotlight on her golden child. No one noticed me. Not until Jake stood up. He looked at me differently now, like something clicked into place. His voice was low but unmistakable. "Commander Foster," he said. "Ma'am." The sound dropped into the room like a stone into water. Every laugh stopped mid-breath. Olivia blinked, confused. "Wait, what?" she said, half laughing. "Jake, she's not that kind of military." But he didn't look away from me. "Spectre Division, right?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded once. Ryan set down his fork. Mom froze mid-sip and Olivia looked like someone had knocked the breath out of her. "You never told me," Jake said to her almost quietly, "that she trained me." The silence that followed was sharp. I stayed seated. I didn't need to stand. I just looked across the table, met Olivia's eyes and said, "You accessed my files." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she said, voice rising too fast. "That's ridiculous." I opened my phone, tapped once and turned the screen to her. Login. Reports file dates. 2 years ago, Fort Waverly Base. Your login. My credentials. Jake leaned forward. "You used her reports in your promotion packet." Olivia shook her head, trying to laugh it off. That wasn't classified. I just needed examples. Everyone shares templates. But she knew. We all knew. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just said you took full strategic debriefs marked confidential and submitted them as your own. You listed campaigns you weren't part of. You quoted directives only issued through top clearance. Dad finally spoke. "Is this true?" His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Olivia's lips moved but nothing came out. She looked trapped, like a kid caught in a lie she couldn't back out of. Jake turned to me. "I've already filed the report with my CEO," he said. "A formal inquiry will follow, but I wanted to be here to say it out loud." I nodded, calm, controlled. "Thank you," I said. Mom looked at me like she didn't recognize who I was. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she asked. I almost laughed. "Because no one ever listened," I said. "You liked the version of me you could explain. I just stopped correcting you." Olivia stood up fast. "You don't get to do this," she said, voice shaking. "You disappeared. You let us believe I let you believe what you needed to," I interrupted. "But I never lied." "You did." She looked at Jake like he might save her. He didn't. He just sat back, eyes locked on the truth. Dad rubbed his temples. "You were always the quiet one," he muttered. "But Olivia had the drive." "No," I said. "Olivia had the spotlight. That's not the same as having value." No one else spoke. The air in the room had shifted. Everything they thought they knew had been undone in under 5 minutes, and I didn't raise my voice once. I stood up slow and steady. "You wanted me small," I said, "because small made you feel big. But I stopped fitting that role a long time ago." I didn't look back as I left. I didn't need to. The truth was already sitting at that table, and it wasn't going anywhere. I didn't look back as I stepped outside. The night air was cool, but it didn't sting. It felt clean, like something had shifted in me. The porch light flickered behind me. The only sound was the slow crunch of gravel under my boots. Inside the car, I sat still for a moment. I didn't turn on the engine. I just let the quiet wrap around me. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt earned. I reached into the glove box and pulled out the envelope I hadn't touched in 6 years. My grandmother's handwriting was faded soft at the corners. I opened it carefully, as if the years had made it fragile. Her words spilled out like a bomb. "Elise, I see you. I always did. You are thunder wrapped in restraint. Don't let their blindness convince you to dim. Let them laugh. Let them underestimate. You don't owe them noise. You owe yourself the truth." I read it again, slower this time. Each line stitched something in me that had come undone. She had written it after I graduated from officer training, said she knew I wouldn't tell anyone, said that was my strength, that my silence wasn't emptiness. It was clarity, focus, power. She knew long before anyone else. Knew the weight I carried, the rooms I would walk into without applause, the decisions I'd have to make without backup. And still she told me to stand, not to shout, not to demand, just to stand. And now, sitting in that car, I understood. Silence wasn't my failure. It was my weapon, my choice, my space to breathe before the truth arrived. Not everyone deserves your story. Not everyone earns your voice. Sometimes silence is what keeps you whole. I folded the letter and placed it on the console beside me. Not to forget, but to remember who I'd always been. Not invisible, not passive, just steady and patient enough to let the truth walk in at the right time. As I drove away, the road felt wider than before. No messages lit up my phone, no one followed. But I didn't feel alone. I felt ready because for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't about hiding. It was about being heard without having to raise my voice.